Now, this is breaking news from WCCO.
Hello, we have breaking news right now. Sentencing is in for the former Minneapolis police officer J. Alexander Kueng. U.S. District Judge Paul Magnuson has sentenced him on 36 months on charges of involuntary manslaughter for the death of George Floyd. Now, we will find out the sentencing for another former officer, Tou Thao, later on this morning. Now, Kueng, Thao, and their colleague Thomas Lane were convicted in February of violating Floyd's rights by depriving him of medical care. Now, Floyd was pinned under former officer Derek Chauvin's knee for 9.5 minutes while Floyd repeatedly said he couldn't breathe. Kueng and Thao were also convicted of failing to intervene to stop Chauvin in the killing, which was recorded on video by a bystander and sparked protests worldwide. Now, while Chauvin pinned down Floyd's neck, Kueng held Floyd's back. Lane held his feet, and Thao kept bystanders from intervening. Chauvin, who pleaded guilty to one count of violating Floyd's rights, did get a federal sentence of 21 years. And then last week, federal judge sentenced Lane to 2.5 years. So we know J. Alexander Kueng now sentenced to 6 more months than that at 3 years. Our legal analyst, Joe Tamburino, here with us now. Joe, are you surprised at this sentence?
No, I'm not surprised. Judge Magnuson has been kind to the 3 other officers. Obviously, he has gone below what the prosecutor has requested, and he's just given Mr. Kueng 6 more months than what Mr. Lane got. So he's getting 3 years.
So we know the prosecutor and George Floyd's family had asked for much more time. What did Judge Magnuson take into consideration?
Mr. Thao, and for that matter, Mr. Lane, just basically misjudged the situation. And really, the fundamental actor in all of this was Mr. Chauvin.
So 36 months, what does that mean in a federal sentence? Do you serve that entire time, and what happens afterwards?
You do not serve the entire time. Basically, in federal sentencing, you get 85% of your time served and 15% off. It's about 54 days off a year. So for a 36-month sentence, you will serve approximately 31 months.
Joe, we have heard the judge say that he's calling the date of surrender October 4th. Because we know J. Alexander Kueng, Thomas Lane, and Tou Thao are not behind bars right now. They are out. But the judge now is saying you need to come and report to prison October 4th. Does that surprise you?
Yes, that does surprise me, because on October 24th is their state trial. And it's very difficult to have a state trial with someone who is in federal custody. Though we might think the federal and local governments coordinate well, sometimes that just doesn't happen. So what that signifies to me is perhaps they're working out a deal in state court.
So why wait then until October 4th?
Well, correct. I mean, if they were really going to go to trial, I would imagine the defense attorneys would have asked the judge to simply delay the reporting date. There's nothing magical about October 4th. Judge Magnuson has the authority to say you don't have to surrender till January of next year. So it's very telling that he or Mr. Kueng is going to be going into federal custody a full 20 days before his state trial.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the same date of surrender for Thomas Lane, too?
I'm not sure about when Mr. Lane was ordered to go in, but Mr. Lane's already wrapped up his cases. He's not going to trial.
Right. The judge also said that he is recommending a federal prison in either Duluth or in South Dakota, trying to keep Mr. Kueng closer to home.
That's correct. I mean, in situations like this where you're serving less than 5 years, the place you want to be is the Duluth work camp. Now, no one wants to be in prison, of course, but if you're going to be going to federal prison, the Duluth facility is the best one. So
he has the federal sentencing here. Let's say they take a plea with the state, or let's say that there is a conviction in the state trial. Would he stay in the federal facility?
I would imagine he would, because here's why. It seems like with the deals they have worked out and agreements on both sides, federal and state, there seems to be the common denominator that these individuals will serve their time in the federal system. We saw that with Mr. Chauvin. We're seeing that with Mr. Lane. So I would imagine these other two would get the same benefit.
Now, Kueng had the opportunity to talk at today's sentencing, chose not to. Does that signify anything to you?
Well, Mr. Lane didn't say anything either, and I think perhaps Mr. King is not saying anything because, again, he's got the state trial coming up in October. So just in case that trial is going to happen, he doesn't want anything he says at this federal sentencing to affect him.
Okay, so we had 30 months for Thomas Lane. We had 36 months for J. Alexander King. What do you think is going to happen for Tou Thao?
I think Mr. Thao will get about the same, 36 months. Mr. Tao's in a completely different situation because we must remember he never even touched Mr. Floyd. He was basically the traffic cop. I could see the judge doing 36 months on that or perhaps even a little less, but I would imagine right in the same ballpark.
So let's go back to this state trial because, right now, is it your sense that, and it sounds like it is to me, that there could be some sort of agreement in the works when it comes to the state trial? Would they still be, even though Thomas Lane took a plea here, would they still be working on this all the way up to the trial date?
Sure. I mean, sometimes cases aren't resolved till literally on the doorsteps of the courthouse. That happens. Now, in a complex case like this, I would imagine it'd be worked out well before that. But what's telling is that Mr. King's defense attorney did not request the judge to delay federal surrender until after the state trial. And normally, if you're going to go to trial in state court and you have someone who's in the federal system, you surely would ask the judge to delay the report date, delay the surrender until after the state's case.
Right. So obviously we're speculating here, but some of these signs point to that there could be a deal in the works. Could that October 4th date move?
Well, you mean the turn-in date on October 4th? Yes, that could move. I mean, anyone, say a judge gives you a specific report date and something happens before you go to report. You can go back to the judge and request, based on certain circumstances, that your report date should be delayed. So it could be moved.
So, Joe, we followed these state trials, obviously, via camera. We watched it live here with you. This time in federal court, no cameras are allowed. So we're following a lot of this on Twitter. Do you believe that what happened just 5 minutes ago with King is the same, what we expect to happen with Thao, too?
Yes, pretty much the same. Absolutely.
Okay. And just one right after the other.
Correct.
At this point. So we know that George Floyd's cousin, his girlfriend, did have an opportunity to speak. That's pretty standard for sentencings like this, right?
Yes, it is. Victims and victim family members are allowed to give input to the judge, whether it's in state or federal court. And in this case, we even heard the judge say that he received a lot of letters, not even from the victim side, but from the defendant's side. So you're allowed to give input into the system. Right.
Letters from fellow police officers around the country. So, all right, Joe Tamburino, our legal analyst here, not affiliated with this case. Thanks so much for talking with us about this sentencing. We'll be checking back with you later on today. Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
So just recapping our breaking news right now, former Minneapolis police officer J. Alexander King has just been sentenced to 3 years in federal court. He has been convicted of depriving George Floyd of his civil rights. Sentencing for former officer Tou Thao is happening right now, and we will bring you live coverage right here on CBS News Minnesota just as soon as we find out about the judge's ruling. Be sure to stay with WCCO on TV and right here at noon throughout the day as well. We'll be streaming on CBS News Minnesota for more on this sentencing.